Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're talking about something that frustrates almost every English learner. And I know you've been there too. Have you ever learned a new word, felt really confident about it, maybe even used it in a sentence, and then the next day, it's completely gone from your mind? It's like it was never there. You sit there trying to recall it. You know you learned it, but it's just not coming back. You feel frustrated. You might even think, maybe I'm just bad at remembering vocabulary. But let me tell you something. That's not the problem. The problem isn't your memory, it's the way you're learning. Let me give you an example. I had a student named Diego who was dedicated to learning English. He would memorize 20 new words every day. He would write them down, repeat them over and over, even try using them in sentences. But when it came time to actually have a conversation, the words just vanished. He'd say, I know I learned these. Why can't I remember them? Sound familiar? That's because our brains aren't designed to remember disconnected information. You see, the brain filters out information that it doesn't see as important. If you memorize a list of random vocabulary words without using them in context or attaching any meaning to them, your brain files them under temporary information, and then it clears them out. That's why you keep forgetting. But here's the good news. You don't need a better memory. You need better learning techniques. Once you understand how your brain processes and stores information, you can start using smart strategies that actually work. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to remember new words and actually keep them in your mind for good. This isn't about cramming or memorizing. It's about training your brain to store and retrieve new vocabulary naturally and easily. So stick with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down the exact techniques that will help you remember new words without forgetting them. And once you apply these strategies, you'll be amazed at how fast your vocabulary improves and how much easier speaking English becomes. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Why you keep forgetting new words. All right, let's get straight to the problem. Why do you keep forgetting new words even after spending hours memorizing them? The reason isn't that you have a bad memory. It's that your brain isn't programmed to store information unless it thinks it's important. Let me explain. Your brain is designed for survival, not for memorizing random lists of words. When you're memorizing new vocabulary without using it in context, your brain treats it like short-term information, the kind of stuff you don't need to keep. Think about it. You wouldn't remember what you had for lunch 2 weeks ago, right? That's because your brain decided it wasn't important. The same thing happens with vocabulary. If you don't use it or attach meaning to it, your brain says, not important. Clear it out. I had a student named Diego from Spain. Diego was committed. He was studying English every day, memorizing up to 100 new words a week. He would write them down, repeat them, and even create flashcards. But when it came time to have a conversation, nothing. He'd freeze. He'd tell me, I know I learned this. Why can't I remember it? And here's the thing. Diego wasn't lazy or unfocused. His problem was that he was learning words in isolation. He was memorizing without context. So when his brain needed to retrieve those words in conversation, they weren't there. They were stored in his short-term memory, but never transferred to his long-term memory. And this happens to so many language learners. You study, you feel like you've got it, and then the next day, it's gone. And that's frustrating because it makes you feel like you're not improving, even though you're working hard. Here's another reason why traditional memorization doesn't work. Cramming. Trying to learn a huge list of words at once is like pouring water into a glass that's already full. It just overflows. Your brain can only handle a certain amount of new information at a time. If you overload it, most of it won't stick. And finally, repetition without purpose. Repeating words over and over without actually using them in context is like trying to memorize the lyrics of a song without ever hearing the melody. It feels disconnected. That's why you might remember the word when you see it written down, but you can't remember it in a conversation. So, the problem isn't you, it's the method. Your brain is working exactly the way it's supposed to, but you're not giving it the right signals to store and retrieve new vocabulary. But don't worry, because in the next section, I'm going to show you how to fix this and start remembering new words for good. Let's keep going. Chapter 2: The Secret to Storing Words in Long-Term Memory. Now that you know why you're forgetting words, let's talk about how to fix it. Here's the secret. Your brain remembers information that it sees as valuable or emotionally important. That's how your memory works. Your brain is constantly deciding what to keep and what to throw away based on whether it thinks the information will help you survive or succeed. Think about this. You probably remember the lyrics to your favorite song from years ago, right? You might even remember what you were doing when you first heard it. Why? Because it's attached to emotion and experience. The melody, the rhythm, and the emotional connection made that information stick. Your brain labeled it as important and stored it permanently. But when you memorize a list of random vocabulary words, there's no emotional connection. It's like trying to remember a series of meaningless numbers. Your brain treats it like temporary data and clears it out to make room for more useful information. That's why you can spend hours memorizing new words and still forget them when it counts. Let me give you an example. I had a student named Maria from Italy who was trying to learn the word embarrassed. She memorized the definition and repeated it multiple times, but kept forgetting it during conversations. But one day, she accidentally walked into the wrong classroom, and everyone turned to look at her. Later, she said, "I was so embarrassed." And from that day on, she never forgot the word. Why? Because her brain connected the word to a real-life emotional experience. It wasn't just a definition anymore. It was a feeling. That's how memory works. Your brain holds on to information that feels real, not just something you repeated 50 times in a notebook. So, how do you apply this to language learning? First, you need to stop treating words like data and start treating them like part of your experience. Attach emotion to the word. When you learn a new word, don't just memorize it. Attach a feeling or situation to it. If you learn the word excited, imagine yourself getting good news and saying, "I'm so excited." Your brain connects the word to the emotional experience, and that makes it stick. Use it in real-life context. After you learn a new word, use it immediately. If you learn the word confident, say, "I'm feeling confident today." Or, "I need to sound more confident in this meeting." When you use the word naturally, your brain understands that it's useful and stores it as valuable information. Create mental images. Your brain loves images. If you learn the word stormy, don't just memorize it. Picture a stormy sky in your mind. If you learn the phrase, "hit the road," imagine someone actually hitting a road and driving off. These mental images create a stronger memory connection. Connect it to something familiar. If you learn the word fascinated, you could say, "I'm fascinated by space." Now your brain connects the word to something you already know and care about. That creates a mental bridge and makes the word easier to recall later. Use the spaced repetition technique. Repetition matters, but only if you do it strategically. If you repeat a word 20 times today and never again, you'll forget it. But if you review it today, then tomorrow, then again in a week, your brain starts building a long-term memory. That's because your brain sees the information being used repeatedly and decides it's important. So, here's the truth. Remembering new words isn't about how hard you study. It's about how you connect those words to your life, emotions, and experiences. When you attach meaning to a word, your brain stores it automatically. That's how native speakers learn. And that's how you'll start remembering new words without even trying. Now that you know the secret, let's move on to the next step. How to use these techniques to build a powerful vocabulary that you'll actually remember. Let's keep going. Chapter 3. Use the 4-step retention technique. Now that you know how to make new words stick, it's time to introduce a powerful system that will help you remember vocabulary faster and more effectively. I call it the 4-step retention technique. It's simple, but it works because it mirrors the way your brain naturally processes and stores information. Most people try to memorize vocabulary by reading or repeating it over and over, but that's not enough. Your brain needs to see, hear, and use the word in different ways before it decides that it's valuable enough to keep in long-term memory. That's where the 4-step retention technique comes in. This technique activates different parts of your brain: auditory, visual, and motor, which makes the memory stronger and easier to recall. When you engage more senses while learning a word, you create deeper connections in your brain, and that makes the word stick. Let me break down the 4 steps for you. 1. Hear it. The first step is to hear the word in a natural context. Your brain learns language better through listening than reading, because that's how we all learned our native language. Example, let's take the word complicated. If you hear someone say, "The instructions were really complicated," your brain hears the pronunciation, tone, and context all at once. That's why listening to conversations, podcasts, and real-life dialogue is so important. You're teaching your brain to recognize the sound of the word and how it fits into a sentence. Exercise. Find a podcast or YouTube video where native speakers are talking naturally. When you hear a new word, pause and repeat it out loud. This helps your brain connect the sound of the word with its meaning. Second, say it hearing the word is good, but speaking it out loud is even better. Speaking engages your brain's motor function, which strengthens the memory. When you say the word out loud, you're reinforcing the pronunciation and training your mouth to produce the sound naturally. It also helps you feel more confident using the word in conversation. Example, after you hear, "The instructions were complicated," repeat it out loud. "The instructions were complicated." Now try using it in a new sentence. "My homework was really complicated this week." Why this works. Your brain starts recognizing the word as something you need to use, not just something you memorized. That's how you shift a word from passive memory, you understand it, to active memory, you can use it. 3. Write it. Next, you need to write the word down, because writing engages the visual and motor parts of your brain. When you physically write down a word, you're reinforcing the spelling and helping your brain map out the structure of the word. But don't just write the word. Write a sentence using it. That gives the word context, and your brain understands how to apply it. Example, write down, complicated. The instructions were complicated. Then challenge yourself to write a new sentence. The math problem was complicated, but I figured it out. Why this works. Your brain is now seeing the word, hearing it, speaking it, and connecting it to context. That's how you create a permanent memory. 4th, use. The final step is the most important. You need to use the word in conversation. Memory is strongest when you apply information in real-life situations. If you never use a word, your brain assumes it's not important and forgets it. But if you use it, especially in conversation, your brain stores it as valuable information. Example, If you learned the word complicated, use it naturally in conversation. That recipe was really complicated. I don't understand this math problem. It's too complicated. Challenge. Make it a goal to use a new word at least 3 times in the same day. That tells your brain that this word matters, and it needs to be stored for long-term use. Let's practice this. Now, let's go through the full process right now with a new word. The word is improve. Hear it. I'm trying to improve my English. Say it. I want to improve my speaking skills. Write it. I'm working hard to improve my listening. Use it. Next time you're talking with a friend or practicing on your own, say, I think my pronunciation is improving. Why this technique works. Your brain processes language faster when you use multiple senses. Hearing, speaking, writing, and context all work together to strengthen the memory. Instead of treating a word as isolated information, you're teaching your brain that the word is valuable and necessary. Now that you understand the importance of repetition and context, it's time to add another powerful memory tool: mental associations. This is where you train your brain to link new words to familiar images, sounds, and feelings, making them easier to recall when you need them. Most people try to remember new words by repeating them, but that only works short term. Your brain remembers information better when it's linked to something meaningful: an image, a story, or an experience. That's because our brains are wired to store and retrieve information through connections, not isolated facts. So instead of treating vocabulary like a list of random words, you're going to create a mental map, a network of associations that makes the words stick naturally. Let me explain exactly how to do that. Your brain processes visual information faster and more efficiently than text. That's why you remember faces better than names. When you link a word to an image, you create a powerful memory anchor. Let's say you want to remember the word apple. Close your eyes and picture a bright red apple sitting on your kitchen table. Imagine the smooth texture of the skin and the crisp sound when you bite into it. Feel the sweetness on your tongue and see the juice dripping down your chin. You've now linked the word apple to a sensory experience: sight, sound, taste, and touch, which makes the memory stronger. Let's try it right now. Think of the word beach. Imagine the sound of waves crashing, the feeling of sand between your toes, and the warmth of the sun on your skin. Now say the word beach out loud. That's a mental association. The next time you hear the word beach, your brain will automatically recall the sensory details, making the word easier to remember. Your brain is more likely to store information when it's connected to an emotion, because emotional experiences activate the amygdala, the part of the brain involved in memory. Let's say you're learning the word embarrassed. Instead of memorizing the definition, think of a moment when you felt embarrassed. Maybe you said the wrong thing in class, or you tripped while walking up the stairs. Link that feeling to the word embarrassed. Now, the word embarrassed isn't just a definition, it's tied to a personal experience. That's why emotional connections make words stick longer. Let's try it now. Think of the word excited. Imagine a time when you were genuinely excited. Maybe before a big trip or an important event. Feel that rush of energy and say the word excited. Now the word excited has emotional weight, and that makes it easier to remember. The memory palace technique is one of the oldest memory tools in history. It works by linking information to physical locations in your mind, like rooms in a house or landmarks on a path. Picture a familiar place: your house, your neighborhood, or a favorite park. Assign new vocabulary to different locations. Walk through that place in your mind and see the new word in context. Let's say you're learning the word lamp. Picture walking into your bedroom. See a bright lamp sitting on your nightstand. Imagine turning it on and feeling the warmth of the light. Now, lamp is linked to your mental image of the bedroom, which helps you recall it faster. Let's try it. Pick a room in your house. Imagine 5 common objects in that room and assign a new word to each one. Walk through that room in your mind and repeat the new words as you visualize them. This technique works because you're not just learning words. You're attaching them to familiar spaces, which helps your brain recall them faster. Your brain responds strongly to auditory information. That's why it's easier to remember song lyrics than random facts. If you link a word to a sound or a rhythm, you'll remember it faster. Let's say you're learning the word rain. Imagine the sound of rain falling outside your window. Hear the steady rhythm of the raindrops. Now say the word rain while imagining the sound. The next time you hear the sound of rain, your brain will automatically pull up the word rain. Let's practice it. Think of the word laugh. Imagine the sound of someone laughing, that deep, contagious laugh that makes you smile. Now say the word laugh and feel the connection to the sound. Your brain is naturally wired for storytelling because stories are how humans have passed down information for thousands of years. If you connect a word to a story, even a simple one, it will stick longer. Let's say you want to remember the word forget. Imagine a story where you forget your phone at home. You're halfway to work, and suddenly you realize it's missing. You retrace your steps and finally find it on the kitchen table. Now the word forget is tied to a personal story, and your brain will store it as meaningful information. Let's try it. Think of the word help. Create a story where you needed help. Maybe your car broke down and a stranger stopped to help you. Now say the word help. The story creates context, and that makes the word stick. Your brain likes patterns, so when you group similar words together, you create an internal memory system that's easier to navigate. Instead of learning the word big by itself, learn it alongside similar words. Big, large, huge, massive, enormous. Create mental images for each one. Maybe big is a big tree, large is a large pizza, huge is a huge mountain, and so on. Now, when you need to describe size, your brain will pull up all the related words automatically. Let's go through the full process together. The word is run. Image. Picture yourself running through a park. Sound. Hear the sound of your footsteps hitting the pavement. Emotion. Feel the rush of energy as you run faster. Story. Imagine you're late for a bus. So you start running. Now you've linked the word run to multiple sensory inputs, and that's what makes it stick. Pick 5 new words today. Create a mental association for each one. Image, sound, emotion, and story. Say the word out loud and use it in a sentence. Repeat this process for a week and watch how easily the words stick. Once you start building mental associations like this, learning new words stops being a chore and starts becoming automatic. Now that you know how to link words to powerful memories, let's move on to the next step. Creating a daily vocabulary routine that makes learning effortless. Let's keep going. Most people think that repeating a word over and over again is enough to remember it, but that's not how memory works. Repetition alone isn't enough, because your brain needs to know that the information is important before it decides to store it in long-term memory. That's where spaced repetition comes in. It's one of the most powerful techniques for locking information into your brain for good. Let me explain why spaced repetition works better than normal repetition. When you learn a new word, your brain stores it in short-term memory first. That's why you can remember it right after you hear it. But short-term memory is fragile. It fades quickly unless your brain gets a signal that the information is important. That's why you forget words after a day or two. Your brain decides it's not valuable enough to keep. Spaced repetition works because it sends your brain the message that this word matters. Every time you review a word at the right interval, you strengthen the neural connection. And that's what moves the word from short-term memory to long-term memory. Let's take an example. You learn the word complicated. You review it immediately after learning. You review it again the next day. Then 3 days later. Then a week later. Then 2 weeks later. Each time you review it, the memory gets stronger, and the time it takes to forget the word increases. After a few repetitions, the word complicated will become automatic. You won't have to think about it. This is why cramming before a test never works long term. If you try to memorize 50 words in one day, you might remember them tomorrow, but by next week, you'll forget most of them. Your brain didn't have enough time to strengthen those connections. Spaced repetition works because it forces your brain to retrieve the information just before you're about to forget it. That moment of effort, when your brain reaches for the memory, is what locks it in. The harder your brain works to retrieve a memory, the stronger it becomes. Let me give you a simple spaced repetition schedule that works. 1. Day 1. Learn 10 new words. Second day, 2. Review those 10 words plus learn 10 new ones. Third day, 3. Review the 20 words plus add 10 more. Fourth day, 5. Full review of all 30 words. Day 5. Review the ones you struggled with. Sixth day, 14. Do a final review of all 30 words. The key is to space out the reviews, not all at once. Your brain strengthens the memory more when there's time between reviews because it has to work harder to pull up the information. Think of it like building muscle at the gym. If you work out every day without rest, your muscles don't have time to repair and grow stronger. But if you work out and give your muscles time to recover, they rebuild stronger each time. Your brain works the same way. Here's how you can apply this immediately. Take 10 new words today. Write them down and create flashcards. Review them tomorrow. Then review them 2 days later. Then 4 days later. Keep stretching out the intervals and watch how easily you start to remember them. Let me make this even easier for you. If you're using an app like Anki or Quizlet, they're already programmed with a spaced repetition algorithm. The app will automatically schedule reviews based on how well you remember the words. If you struggle with a word, the app will show it more often. If you remember it easily, the app will increase the time between reviews. You can also use this technique with physical flashcards. Write the new word on one side and the definition on the other side. Review the ones you got wrong more frequently. Gradually increase the time between reviews for the ones you remember easily. Here's a challenge. Take 10 new words today. Create flashcards, either physical or digital. Set up a review schedule. Tomorrow, 3 days later, 1 week later, and 2 weeks later. Track how much easier it is to remember the words after using this method. And don't stop with just words. You can apply this to phrases and grammar patterns too. If you learn a new phrasal verb, use the same schedule. Review, repeat, space it out, and you'll start speaking with more confidence and accuracy. Spaced repetition works because it's based on how your brain naturally stores information. Once you stop relying on last-minute cramming and start using this system, you'll be amazed at how much more you can remember and how quickly your vocabulary grows. The key isn't memorization, it's strategic review. Now that you understand how to make your brain work for you, it's time to apply it to real-life situations. Let's move on to the next step. Learning how to use new words naturally in conversations. Most people think that learning new words is enough, but that's not true. If you don't use the words you've learned in real life, your brain won't store them as useful. The fastest way to make a word stick is to use it in your daily life. In real conversations, messages, and even thoughts. Let me explain why this works. Your brain is constantly trying to decide what's important and what's not. If you only see a word on paper or hear it once, your brain might decide it's not important and forget it. But when you use that word in a conversation, a text, or even while talking to yourself, your brain recognizes it as valuable. That's when the word moves from short-term to long-term memory. Think of it this way. If you meet someone once, you'll probably forget their name. But if you see them every day and say their name when you greet them, suddenly, their name becomes easy to remember. That's exactly how your brain works with vocabulary. Let's take an example. Say you learn the word confident. First, you hear it in a sentence. She's really confident when she speaks. Then you say it. I want to feel more confident when I speak English. Next, you write it down. I'm working on being more confident. But the real magic happens when you use it in conversation. Let's say you're at work and someone asks how you're feeling about a project. Instead of saying, it's okay, you say, I feel confident about it. Suddenly, the word confident becomes part of your natural vocabulary. You're no longer memorizing it. You're living it. Let's try another example. You learn the word awkward. First, you hear it in context. That was an awkward moment. Then you say it. I felt so awkward during the meeting. Next, you write it down. I hate feeling awkward in social situations. Finally, you use it. That conversation was a bit awkward, wasn't it? When you see, say, write, and use a word, your brain starts recognizing it as valuable information. And once your brain marks it as important, it holds on to it longer. Now, let's take this one step further. You don't have to wait for a conversation to use new words. You can practice on your own. Here's how you can start using new words right away. 1. Talk to yourself. When you're cooking, say, I feel confident about trying this new recipe. 2. Use it in a message. Text a friend. I feel so confident about the presentation tomorrow. 3. Practice in your head. Imagine conversations where you would use the word confident. 4. Use it in a social setting. Next time someone asks how you're doing, say, I'm feeling confident today. Your brain will start to expect the word in certain situations, and that's when it becomes automatic. Let me give you a quick exercise to try right now. Take a word you learned today. Let's say it's challenging. First, say it out loud. This is challenging. Then create a sentence. This project is really challenging. Now think about a situation where you can use it. Maybe at work you can say, I'm working on a challenging task. Finally, use it. The next time you face a difficult situation, say, this is challenging, but I'm handling it. That's how you move from memorizing words to using them fluently. The more you use a word in different situations, the more natural it becomes. It's like muscle memory. The more you repeat it, the faster it sticks. Here's a personal example. When I was learning the word overwhelmed, I struggled to remember it at first. But one day I was talking to a friend about work, and I said, I'm feeling really overwhelmed today. It clicked. After that, I started using the word every time I felt stressed. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And now it's one of the easiest words for me to remember. The key here is confidence over perfection. You don't need to use the word perfectly. You just need to use it. If you say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, instead of, I'm feeling overwhelmed, it doesn't matter. The person you're talking to will understand, and your brain will still register the connection. Now, let's do an interactive exercise. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to create a sentence using it. Confident. What's one thing you feel confident about? Awkward. When was the last time you felt awkward? Challenge. What's the biggest challenge you faced this week? Drop your answers in the comments. I'd love to hear them. This is where fluency happens. Not in a textbook, but in real life. When you start using words naturally in conversations, they stop being new words. They become part of your natural speaking ability. So, here's the challenge for you. Pick 3 new words today. Use them in a conversation, a text, and a thought. Repeat this process daily and see how quickly your vocabulary grows. Stop trying to memorize and start living the language. That's how you remember words without forgetting them. Let's keep building on this momentum. Next, I will show you how to reinforce those words through strategic review. Most people struggle to remember new words because they don't have a system to organize and review them. When you learn a new word and then forget it, it's not because you have a bad memory. It's because your brain doesn't have a structured way to store and retrieve that information. That's where a personal vocabulary bank comes in. A personal vocabulary bank is a collection of the words you've learned, organized in a way that makes it easy to review and use them in real life. It's like having a private dictionary, but instead of just definitions, it includes examples, context, and personal connections, which makes the information stick better. Let me walk you through how to create one. First, decide how you want to store it. You can use a notebook. Write your new words by hand. This reinforces memory because writing activates more areas of the brain. A notes app. Keep it simple and easy to access. Flashcard app. Apps like Anki or Quizlet are great for reviewing using spaced repetition. Once you've chosen your method, here's what to include for each new word. 1. The word. Write down the word clearly at the top. 2. Definition. Keep it short and simple. Avoid complicated explanations. 3. Example. Sentence. Create a sentence that reflects how you would naturally use the word. 4. Personal connection. Attach an emotional or personal story to it. This helps your brain store the information more deeply. 5. Date learned. This helps you track when you learned it and when you should review it. Let's go through an example together. Let's say the word is reluctant. Word. Reluctant definition. Unwilling or hesitant. Example. I was reluctant to speak English at first because I was scared of making mistakes. Personal connection. Remember the first time you hesitated to join a conversation in English because you weren't confident. That's reluctance. Date learned. March 21st, 2025. See how simple but powerful this is? You're not just memorizing the word. You're giving it meaning and context that sticks in your mind. Here's why this works. When you attach personal meaning to a word, your brain processes it as important information. That's why you remember emotional experiences better than random facts, because your brain is wired to store emotional connections more deeply. Now let me share a quick story with you. When I was learning English, I kept forgetting the word awkward. I knew the definition, but every time I tried to use it, my mind would go blank. Then, one day, I was in a conversation where I said something weird, and the other person laughed. I said, "Wow, that was awkward." And guess what? From that moment on, I never forgot the word. Why? Because I had attached a personal experience to it. That's the key. Personal connection. Once you've created your vocabulary bank, it's important to review it regularly. Here's a simple review schedule. Day 1. Write down the word and review it the same day. Day 2. Review it again and try using it in a sentence. Day 4. Check the word. Does it still feel natural? Day 7. Use the word in a real conversation or message. Day 14. Final review. By now, the word should feel like part of your natural vocabulary. This is spaced repetition in action, but combined with emotional connection and real-life usage. That's why it works. Let's try building a vocabulary bank right now. Take out a notebook or open a notes app. Write down a new word you've learned recently. Add a simple definition, an example sentence, and a personal connection. Set a reminder to review it in 2 days. If you keep building your vocabulary bank consistently, you'll be amazed at how quickly your vocabulary grows. Even better, you'll start remembering and using words naturally without even thinking about them. Now, here's a challenge for you. Write down 5 new words today. Create a personal connection for each one. Use them in conversation or writing over the next week. Leave a comment below sharing one word from your vocabulary bank. I'd love to hear how you're building your vocabulary. This is how you stop forgetting words and start using them like a native speaker. Keep building your vocabulary bank, because the more you fill it, the more confident you'll feel when you speak. All right, now you've got the tools. You know why you've been forgetting words, and now you know exactly how to fix it. The key isn't to memorize more, it's to learn smarter. Focus on building mental connections, using spaced repetition, and practicing every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Now it's your turn. Don't just watch this video. Take action. Pick 5 new words today. Write them down, create sentences, and practice them out loud. Tomorrow, review those words and add 5 more. Keep doing this every day, and you'll be amazed at how much you remember after just 1 month. And remember, fluency doesn't come from perfection. It comes from consistency. Keep showing up, keep practicing, and don't get discouraged if it feels slow. Progress is happening, even when you don't see it right away. You've got this, and I can't wait to hear about your progress. If you found this helpful, give this video a like and let me know in the comments which technique you're going to try first. And don't forget to subscribe, because more powerful learning tips are coming your way. Now go out there and start using your new words today.